are, for the first time, Two Legs is doing a fest panel, and we're excited about it. This is the 50th anniversary of Rose Speedway, and I'm Tom Hunyadi.
And I'm Andy Nichols.
And this is Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast, and we're happy to be here and talking about this album that has, I think it has a love-hate relationship sometimes. I think there's a lot, a bunch of people out there that love it, and some that not so much.
And it is episode number
201.
Thank you. We had to do that. Yeah, it's a love-hate. It's actually celebrating its 50th anniversary right around now. It came out in April of '73, so the timing is really fortuitous for it when thinking about a topic to do. I said, Tom, we gotta do Rose Speedway.
Right.
Gotta do it.
Perfect opportunity, and not only that is, I mean, it is kind of a fun, unique album to talk about as well. I mean, it's got a history to it. I mean, there's the debate whether or not, Wings, and you wanted to be a double album, right? But then it turns out to be the single album, and the debate begins: is Wings really a band? And all that. Yeah, and all of that. So. But tell me about your experience with...
Well, if you couldn't already tell, I love the album quite a bit. And it was one of my first entry points to Paul's solo career. And Tom and I have had great discussions about Red Rose Speedway in my short time with him, 3+ years. And I'm it's one of my favorite albums, one or two. And Tom is kind of lukewarm with it, but it's nice that we can actually agree to disagree on it, but find that there's really great parts of it and not great parts of it. I do think that it would have been nice to have been a double album, and I think Tom really would have loved that. I love the album as it was presented to us, as Paul McCartney and Wings. I know the band concept is supposed to be there, and you don't really get that with this album, but to me, it's one of the best ever.
Yeah, because when we do say is Wings a band, I mean, they are there, they are present, they do. It's not like James Taylor, well, he'll record the album and he's got sessions, musicians. This is really actually the people that play live on these songs actually do play live on the record. So Denny Sywell is playing drums on the record as well as
and some contextual history. And those of you who are in this room probably already know this, but the album was really made while it was a vehicle called The Tour. Of '72, while they were while touring in Europe, recording in between. This took a while to do. It comes out in April of '73, but it's all really recorded in sessions, in spaces.
72,
between tours.
73.
So it really, and you know that when you look through the album in the touring booklet, you're seeing shots of Wings performing live as a band. To your point about, well, are they really a band or not? Well, if you look at the booklet, you see all these great shots of Wings performing live over Europe, and then you hear a maybe somewhat sterile sounding record.
But if you have to look in the booklet, right?
Yes.
If you look on the cover, who's the only member of Wings on that cover?
Who's the only one that matters?
Well, there you go. And there you go. See, that's why the debate continues.
Oh, God. That's it.
Yeah.
So what was when did you first discover? I discovered this in the early 90s. I was 13. When did you first discover?
Same. I mean, obviously, when I first started listening to Beatles and solo, it was all the best, Wings greatest. So obviously, I heard My Love to death.
Okay.
So knew that. Then come, later in the 90s when my uncle and I, we were doing the What If the Beatles Never Broke Up CDs. what you do when, you take the solo stuff and you make, albums out of them. Then that's when I started buying everything. And then that was when I first listened to the whole album as a whole. And I was like, wow, what a great start. I'm a lover of the first side. I think first side might be one of his best A-sides ever.
Big Barn.
Then you turn it over.
Then turn it over.
And that's where we disagree.
No. But we do it, and we do it lovingly. I mean, the medley. I mean, I love the medley. Any love for the medley in here? Anybody? Oh, right. It could be craftsmanship. I mean, I know what Paul says. He never did a medley after Abbey Road, and he likes to forget that he did this one.
Yeah. Remember, it was full, right? He's got that medley at the end, and he says, "This was my first medley since Abbey Road."
Conveniently forgetting that he did one on this record. Let's just forget that.
He was the one where it was at. He knows where it was at, so he knows.
He knows.
Yeah, however, listen, history, it came out again, so obviously this version, there's the box set that came out in that Wings box that came out in 2018, and it's in the last 5 years since. It's nice to see Red Rose Speedway kind of get its due.
The reprisal, it's been good. I mean, just like all McCartney stuff as it's been being reissued, it's been all being reprisal favorably. I mean, look, I remember when Wildlife was coming out with Red Rose Speedway, I was seeing comments people, oh, I can't believe I'm going to buy this again. I can't stand this album. But then I've seen so much appreciation since then.
Sure.
For both albums.
For both.
Wildlife and Red Rose Speedway.
Let's talk double album
Right.
rejection in light of other albums coming out that were also 2 double albums by a spouse of a former partner of his.
No, we're staying on.
No, I was just gonna say, okay?
Different genres, though. I mean, I think people expect, or EMI, who's releasing these albums, are not expecting, so maybe they're not as producing as many copies.
She got 2 double albums in 1973, and they said no to him.
Who's she married to? Who's she married to?
John Lennon.
Okay, whose ear does John Lennon have?
He had the ear of the EMI chair at that time, Joe Lyon.
Well, Alan Klein as well.
We have ultimately
in the Alan Klein factor as well.
Right, and of course, having all the money is still being pooled here, it's all going to the pot still. So she can get 2 double albums, but we can't give Paul one.
Well, I really do believe that Paul would have caused some kind of stink, like he did for the release of McCartney, okay? They were going to push his release this summer, right? But no, he held true. He said, no, this album's coming out in April. And I believe if he would have caused some kind of stink, maybe they would have gave in for the double album. But again, the debate is, would that have sold? Would the material, the rest of the material that would have gone on this album, would that have been good enough to sell? When you know you're probably only going to release 1 single because you know Live and Let Die is coming.
Live and Let Die is coming, and they may not have sold. But, you know, they could have just tried. I mean, I know Wildlife was like, oh, we went to number 10, so we're gonna, and that was billed obviously to Wings. Now we're going to give you Paul McCartney and Wings, so people know, and that's why they threw his face on there with the brothers on it.
And what's the TV special called?
James Paul McCartney.
Exactly.
So there's this identity thing, like, yeah, we want you to be a band, but you've got to be front and center. And like the album cover says.
Right. So double album. What did you like? What's gone that you wish?
Tragedy would have been nice on the album. I think Tragedy would have been a nice track. I mean, if he wanted to kind of get that, we're going to give you some live tracks, we're going to give you some studio tracks to show you what we are as a band. Coming together, touring and recording, and also doing the studio stuff. That if that could have been condensed to a single LP, maybe that would have been better. You know, throw out, personally, you could take Loop, First Indian on the Moon, throw that one out. That's the only clunker. That one's got to go. You?
Best Friend. I'm a big fan.
That could be on here.
Best Friend, I think, is great. Seaside Woman. Say what you want about Linda McCartney's vocals. I think that song is fantastic.
It's a good song, but I'm not losing Paul McCartney vocal
Still
for that.
better than Cook of the House, though, right?
It is.
Okay.
It is.
That should have been the first.
It's better than
McCartney vocal on Wings Up.
You know, in the ethos of what he wanted, he was kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. I wanted to be a band, but I've got all these pressures to put it out. You know, I want to be a band, but it's really not. You know, it's not.
It is and it isn't. I mean, look, you got those singles too, right? You got Give Honor Back to the Irish. Didn't set the world on fire.
All the 72
Mary
singles.
Had a Little Lamb. I mean, okay.
Top 10.
Top 10. Hi. Top 10. Okay, but that's not McCartney standards, right? That's not what we're used to seeing McCartney, right? McCartney won number 1, Ram goes to number 2.
Commercial success, but not critical success, because the critics, as we know, sorry Joe, we're just all in love with John at this time, not Paul. They were, and this was the period where it was like, now it's like, okay, this is actually really good music. 50 years on to say, okay, a lot of time has passed, let's look at this music.
Right.
Without the factor in the debris breakup of the Beatles and all that went on with it.
Right. So
and that a gem like this gets overlooked because of that.
Well, also though, but when you got so much great material coming out after this, it is easy to.
Another run, Venus and Mars, Juniors and
all these consecutive, these number 1 albums coming out, it is easy to forget, a subpar. Sorry. It's okay.
It's okay.
But that's fine. But I do appreciate more now these days, But it's still, I think, for me, it works better as a double album, which I think a lot of us can agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have, and we got the proposed double LP when it came out again in 2018. And it's a nice listen and having those tracks on there, but to me, that's not going to replace what originally came out first. That's the tried and true, you know, and we know all those tracks were recorded during that time, but, you know, to hear it sequenced, and it was done very well, you know, on that one. But just give me the 9 tracks, you know, as they were. Little Man Dragonfly, come on, is that not one of the best songs you've ever heard, ever? Yeah. I think the majority of the room agrees that Little Man Dragonfly is a gem, right?
So other tracks from this proposed double album, Night Out.
Night Out,
Would
yeah.
have been great. The Mess, which we ended up getting.
Well, on the B side of
B-side
mine.
of mine.
How about 1882?
1882, fantastic track.
Great, now we talked, I think we heard Alan Koza talk a little about that, his discussion on the book, how macabre that song was. It was basically like a take on Les Miserables. Somebody goes and steals a loaf of bread and then gets quartered for it. You know, very rarely do you have songs in the McCartney catalog that are so dark like that. And that 1882 was clearly one of those. Probably wisely left off the LP.
Right. You mentioned Tragedy.
Tragedy by the cover song by the Fleetwoods, a really odd early 50s song. And they do a great version of it with sitar as well.
I Lie Around.
I Lie Around, yeah, which would end up being the B-side to Live and Let Die, a nice kind of code, Denny and Paul.
Right.
You know, where that would have been, I actually think that would have been a better album cut than a B-side.
Yeah.
Kind of gets buried there a little bit.
Right.
You know, so for all this activity in the spring of '73, you know, his B-sides would have been like as good A-sides ever.
The thing now is okay, so My Love comes out in April, then you got Live and Let Die comes out in the summer.
Yeah.
Then you have to wait, I think it's like November or December, then we get Hell on Wheels. There's enough room there for perhaps a second single from the album.
What would you have picked?
That's the tough.
What would you have picked?
I'm thinking maybe Get On the Right Thing.
Get on the Right Thing, which we know was a leftover from Ram. Well, obviously, it started in 7, as we know in the great book, the Legacy book, it goes back to 1970, Get on the Right Thing. That would have been, you know, that was actually proposed as a single, but was rejected at the time and held over for this great album. I think Get on the Right Thing probably would have been the best single, the second follow-up single. My Love, of course, I think, other than maybe I'm Amazed, which I think that's the one, that's the first time, like, I think he has a real true bona fide smash hit, right? Now, we know Maybe I'm Amazed becomes a huge hit in Wings Over America in '77. But in '73, My Love, I mean, who bought this album? Anybody buy this album when it first came out in '73 here? Anybody? Yeah. Did you like it right away?
No.
Do you like it now?
Yes.
Okay.
I was going to say, I always thought My Love was maybe an Amazed Part 2.
Right. Part 2.
Good way to look at it.
I mean, you could call it schmaltzy a little bit, you know, and that video, my God, with the mullet. Which actually just got a 4K remaster on Paul's YouTube channel if you want to see. So if you couldn't see the mullet in really bad quality, now you can see it in pristine 4K.
Not only is a mullet, it's the same hairdo as Linda.
But yeah, single. I mean, it's nice that, like, you know, I think it's nice to do these because they're forcing him to go back and look at it and say, hey, what are your thoughts and memories about this album? And he probably doesn't have a whole lot, but by doing these series 50 years later, you're giving him, you know, a reason to go back and tell you about Get on the Right Thing, the medley, which he actually talks about. So if you look at the books of these, they're awesome because we're getting what we want and to hear him speak on it.
Well, he's probably not going to have any fond memories of it because of the fact that, look, he's being told this cannot be a double album, and then on top of that, you can't call it Wings, you have to call it Paul McCartney and Wings. But because we want a Paul record, no one else can have a lead vocal because we want a Paul McCartney record.
Right, and I guess after the success, obviously, of Men on the Run, he's like, okay, we're going to call it Wings, and now we're going to be a little more democratic. And these days, it was still again, it was not cool to like Paul McCartney and Wings in 1972 or 3. You were, I'm sure, from what I've read, you were considered a real geek if you liked Harry Had a Little Lamb and everything else, and you weren't as cool listening to, you know, Give Me Some Truth and, you know, Mother and all those other great songs, which I love, but that was like, oh, you're like Wings? No, well, later for you. That was the thought back then, and that really sucked because the music stands the test of time.
You got a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, you mentioned earlier, and I think you reinforced that too, that you bought this in real time and didn't like it, but now you do. And this sense of like reevaluating a lot of Paul's music, especially some of the earlier stuff. I thought that same thing, and I'm wondering, what your thoughts are as to why that is, because the music isn't changing, it's us,
Well,
our perception of it maybe.
It's the narrative. It's the narrative at that time. Look, I mean, John was the man at that point in time, right? I mean, he had the backing of the people. Paul, right, broke up the Beatles, as they say. Nobody knew about that meeting in September where John...
69, right. And all you know is that Paul is the one who filed a lawsuit to dissolve the Beatles.
Right,
And
because another-
people were like, they took it out on him. They were like, you broke this band up. So anything you write, we're going to just say, later for you, we're going to John.
If I may say something?
Please.
Yeah, that's why I believe and agree with all that, it's true. But I think that arguably, the early Paul stuff wasn't as great as the stuff people were used to.
So you don't think Ren is great?
Well, now I do. A lot of people didn't.
Oh.
But compared to, they were thinking Long Winding Road.
Right. They're thinking, where's the guy that wrote Golden Slumbers and the Long
Which
Winding
is
Road?
fair. It's right, fair. That's what their minds were. But I do think, overall, I love the early stuff now. I really think
And it's-
less than the Beatles.
It's so hard to go back in the time, especially when you weren't there, to look at it, and the few that were here and got that album when it came out, I'm sure you can remember that it was like a real big deal. I mean, it was to like this stuff in the wake of John and everything else, and the breakup, and how, before media and everything else, and how important that was, and what John was doing. It was like, everything that came out was so magnified, because there was less vehicles of social media. So I think that reappraisal has helped in the 50 years now, because we have gotten some distance from it to say, okay, let's look at this, and what does history actually show us?
Another thing I think that may have helped is the Red and the Blue albums came out before this album, so I think that draws some interest. That gets the kind of like the wheels turning a little bit. And people are excited about the Red and Blue album. Then here comes McCartney with his release. That goes to #1. George's album comes out. That goes to #1 as well. So it all comes
And this
back to the-
baby bumped off the Blue album for #1 charts,
Right.
#1 on the charts.
But then George bumped the...
Yeah, but you know, he must have been like, once his album bumped out a Beatle album, he was like, ha, gotcha.
But
You know
it
he
goes
was.
back to, with the Beatles setting the tone with those Red and Blue albums, and then, it comes to a point where we're going to probably talk about one day on Talk More Talk, the sums greater than the parts. And, with the Red and the Blue setting the pace for it, yeah, they set the pace. If this was released before the Red and Blue, maybe it doesn't have the same success.
Yeah, because that fever, as we talked about the other night, that fever of like Beatles nostalgia started to happen in '73, right? So when that happens, now it's like, okay, this is, it's cool to like this stuff again. And maybe if it comes out in '72, it doesn't do as well.
Klein's grip is loosening.
By April of '73, John, George, and Ringo cut ties with Klein.
Right. Paul's talking about possibly working with them again. What Elliot Ness is doing his beach interview with John. He's
Later in the year, but
something.
right. So it was a point in time where so when you think about it contextually, he had to start all over again from scratch. So when you hear McCartney, you hear him, he's starting over from scratch, even though people wanted to hear Eleanor Rigby and they wanted to hear Golden Slumbers and all these other songs. He's like, look, that was then, I have to forge a new identity now. And it's, when you look at the progress, Ram, Wildlife, Red Rose Speedway, Band on the Run, you can see a logical progression of where he was going musically. And just how people just did not understand that at the time. They're like, he's a Beatle, it's gotta be fantastic. Well, it is fantastic, you just need to look at it with another pair of lenses, that's all.
But I mean, why did he have to find his identity? But John and George really didn't. I mean, they came out of the bad swing.
I was thinking about this. This came out in April of '73.
Correct.
And John could do along. John was in the toilet in that time. After some time in New York City.
After the fact. Well,
Yeah, but I mean '72.
but he's still a
He's still a force to be reckoned with. I know after some time in New York City, he was like, whoa, okay, we're gonna take a,
John
John.
would say Jan Werner, Rolling Stone.
Well, yeah.
He was the darling.
Yes.
To him. But generally speaking, he was the nut job that was with Yoko, right? Sometime in New York City, living crap.
Right.
He wasn't like, Prince.
No, but it was cool and hip to like Lennon, and if
He
you,
always will be.
that's fine. And it's cool and hip to like McCartney too. And it will be.
But anyways, let's take a look at the tracks here.
Yeah.
Opening track, Big Barn Bed. pretty cool rocker. Not only does it open the album, but it also opens the James Paul McCartney special, which I think was a pretty cool touch as well.
Yes.
I love the wall of TVs. You know, you love the little, the chat, you know, the get to know you segment, you know, the writings on.
So let's do rapid fire on a scale of 1 to 10 on all these songs.
Oh, 1 to 5.
Fine, Big Bar Band, what?
4.
5. Hey, My Love, next.
5.
5. Get on the Right Thing.
5.
5. One More Kiss.
4.
5. Little Land Dragonfly.
5.
5. Single Pigeon.
2.
5. Win the Night.
2.
5. Loop.
1.
1. The Medley.
2.5.
5. No, but the album is short. It's short enough. It goes through. How are we doing on time?
We got a couple more minutes.
All right, good. Yeah. Other than Get on the Right Thing, favorite track.
Oh, My Love.
Yeah.
And
Even now.
Yeah, even now, I'll take the whoa, whoa, whoa
Oh.
every day of the week.
Yeah.
Every day of the week. Little Land Dragonfly, again, I think it's a masterpiece of a song, but it doesn't have that, you know, repeat listen.
Dragonfly?
Yeah, Dragonfly to me.
Wow.
I love it. It's a track that I can listen to, but I'm not gonna play it over and over again like I would some like a track like My Love. I can listen to that one over and over again.
Really?
Yeah, myself. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. What about you? What's some favorites in the audience for this one, for this album? Call them out.
Joe?
I love Big Barn Bed.
Yeah.
Favorite track on there. I love my 2 favorites.
Big Barn, how about you guys?
Little Land Dragonfly and also Get on the Right Thing.
Awesome.
Backing vocals on that are fantastic. Same with Big Barn Bed. I love, you know, you can definitely hear Linda, you know, belting out the Big Barn Beds there on the towards the end of that track. Yeah.
All right, if you had to pick one song that you'd like to hear him play live now, other than My Love, what would it be
Oh, wow.
on this album?
Big Barn Bed.
Yeah, that could work.
I think that could work.
That would be a great song to do. I gotta Get on the Right Thing.
Yeah.
What's that?
I can see, you know, Paul doing that in a Vegas residency or something like that. You know, just do a little nightclub scene, you know, kind of thing.
If you,
piano, you know.
If you, I think you can do one more kiss. If you read the McCartney Legacy book, did you remember the story about Single Pigeon?
Go for it.
Apparently, is this when, what's his face was still, Glyn Johns, Glyn Johns, okay, famous producer, came in and worked on Red Rose Speedway for a little bit. After 2 weeks, he was like, "You're all stoned out of your mind, I'm out of here." Apparently, they spent like hours upon hours on Single Pigeon, which is just less than a 2-minute song. They were like, "You guys are just beyond stoned, I'm out of here. I'm going to work with the Who and the Rolling Stones, see you later." And he did, but that makes the cut.
Yeah. But then they toured.
Yeah?
And I love how, you know, a song like My Love, which started during the university tour.
They started playing it before it was released, the year prior.
Yeah. So you got all these people hearing a song like My Love and The Mess early in those early tours, and they're like, where is the song coming from? You know, how come we haven't heard it anywhere else? They have to wait another 2 years, you know, to finally
To hear it.
to hear it. You know, but then they're getting it live on every tour.
And they're hearing this song, and then finally it comes out officially, like, oh, that's the song we were waiting to hear.
And it's changed too, because if you listen to like an early version of My Love, you'll hear Linda, when Paul sings My Love, then Linda will repeat.
She'll do the call and response thing.
Exactly.
We have a couple of minutes left, so let's just throw it out to some questions.
What do you think about Rose Speedway when I was younger? And I was being a young kid. I was shocked at the book they came with.
The artwork.
Artwork and
Yeah.
two ladies.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was the artwork of Eduardo Pelosi, who Paul knew from his Liverpool days.
Right.
And he drafted him in to kind of put together this risque, kind of modern look with some of these images that you talked about in the book. And they are, you know,
Some of the later issues, they got rid of
they did because of the images, yeah.
A cool thing, a little tidbit on that is that artist, he turned down Stanley Kubrick he wanted his artwork for Clockwork Orange. But then he ended up agreeing to work with Paul a couple years later.
Yeah, so it's a little different, you know, some of these images in here. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. We'll look later if you want. Any other questions, comments before we wrap it up? Because the next panel's coming in. Yes?
What was the impetus, I mean, no, there was an affection between the two of them, but putting Braille on the back of the album.
Oh, Stevie
Oh,
Wonder.
for Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
So the back of the album has a message in Braille. Now, on this copy that I have here is an original UK pressing, so it's a little different in America, but at the top, if you put your fingers over it in Braille, it was a message for Stevie Wonder. And it said, "We love you, baby." That's what it says, it was meant for Stevie. It's a little bit, you can feel it better on an American pressing, which on the American pressing it's at the bottom. It's
Right.
UK, it's on the top.
Right.
Okay. 2 minutes left.
Joe?
Yeah, good question. Andy, this is for you.
Okay?
Rose Speedway
Yeah.
or London Town?
It's like picking a favorite kid, man.
Can you do it? Can you do it?
I'll say Red Rose Speedway because it's today. Tomorrow we're in London Town.
We do the 50th anniversary of London Town, it'll be London Town.
Thank you. Any other questions before we wrap it up?
Good?
All right.
All right, well, thank you for joining us for our first fest panel.
First panel. Thank you everybody for coming. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you in the next episode too late.
Take care.
See ya.
You've been listening to Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast, hosted by Tom Hunyadi and Andy Nichols, with musical contributions by Dylan